Hello, this is John Majori, and this is the Majori on Bowie YouTube channel, where I have a new interview every week that always has something to do with David Bowie. And for daily content, visit the blog, www.majorionbowie.com, where I have new content every single day that almost always has something to do with David Bowie. And while you're here, hit like and subscribe so you'll get notified whenever there's a new video. This is a particularly special show, and I'm particularly excited to have as my guest the one and only Dr. Leah Kardos. Dr. Kardos is a musician, writer, and academic based in London. At Kingston University, she lectures in music and music technology. She leads the Visconti Studio, a research and recording facility co-founded by none other than Tony Visconti herself. She is the author of Blackstar Theory, the last works of David Bowie, which was released in 2022, which is one of the best analyses of anything that I've ever read. In fact, I taught a class on political science where I recommended it, not because it has anything to do with political science, but I wanted to demonstrate how you analyze something. And I used that as a recommended reading. Her latest book is part of the 33 and a third series. It's about Kate Bush's Hounds of Love, and that book came out in November of 2024. I should add that Dr. Kardos is a favorite among the Bowie community, and she is a genuine celebrity in my household. In fact, when I was reading her book, I was so excited that my wife began to make fun of me. And whenever I mentioned her name, my wife would do the Flash Gordon aha sound. So, and that continues to this day. So I can think of nobody I would rather have to talk about the 10th anniversary of Blackstar and really the 10th anniversary of David Bowie's passing. And several of my shows around this time are going to touch on those themes. But really, Dr. Leah Kardos, thank you. I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show.
You're welcome. That was a bit excruciating hearing you talk about me like that. Yeah, happy to be here.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So let me start with this. You know, the song Blackstar has a provocative lyric, something happened on the day he died. What happened and what's happened since?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
Bowie I think his music definitely took a turn with Blackstar. That single, when it came out, this month, 10 years ago, really signaled something quite exciting with his aesthetic and being mysterious and being quite symbolic, and referencing his own legacy and his own narrative story. And that was really exciting. The album Blackstar was really exciting. But then, of course, when he died, something happened, and that was that he sort of became mythological in a totally new way and kind of redefined rock star iconography. And his mourning, his public mourning, global public mourning, was really interesting. And also what's happened with his legacy in the intervening decade is interesting as well, tracing it and what Bowie means as an image, as a star image, what his music means to people and to generations of listeners who didn't grow up with him but discovered him post his passing. I think it's really interesting. I mean, to give you like a kind of encapsulated soundbite as to what happened is going to be too much. It's probably like a books project, really.
Right.
But it's interesting nonetheless, as a music scholar, to think about posthumous existence and being somehow alive and still vibrant in the culture, even though he's passed. And what's emerged since so many of the boomer generation have passed who are celebrities is like necro-capitalism. And I think that's a really nasty element that's emerged. But yeah, ripe for analysis and ripe for thinking about. I mean, what do you think about it all?
Well, one of the things that I am trying to contemplate in some of my writing is that you said the mythologization of Bowie, right? And the extent to which he's transcended being a singer or a musician or an artist and a symbol. Or I live in New York State, And I don't live in New York City, but I'm in New York City frequently, and you can't walk 2 blocks without seeing either the image of David Bowie or some reference. There's a Blackstar bar, there's lightning bolts all over the place. And right, those, he's joined James Dean and Marilyn Monroe and Elvis,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
having symbols that are associated with him take on meaning that I don't think existed during his life. And I'm not, you're in London, and I think that you experience it there as well. I'm not, one of the questions I have is that universal or is it geographic?
It's hard to know living in
Yeah,
a city that has a Bowie connection, or living in, New York. He lived there. It's, I don't know, but certainly the symbolic, the semiotic connection of stars and lightning bolts and black stars, um, being used a lot in designs and being appropriated in sort of cultural products, and Bowie's sort of his visual aesthetic being invoked as a kind of meaning of like genius, or
yeah,
being a sort of prophetic in his way of seeing into the future. And it doesn't bother me. I quite like it, because I'm a fan, and I like my favorite being everyone's favorite. That's always a nice thing. The thing that um the thing that sometimes gives me pause is where the image of the artist recedes, and you don't really get an engagement with the chewy, difficult side of his artistry, which to me is the most interesting thing about him as an artist, the way that he deliberately engaged not problematic but complicated ideas about ethics and light and dark and
right.
shadow selves, and invoked dark and troubling imagery quite often, particularly, I mean, throughout his whole career, really, but in a very kind of visceral way since the 90s leading up to his death. And that to me seems really diminished now. You sort of see people talk about our starman, and I'm like, is he really your starman? Like, is that what he
Right.
meant by that? And is that what that song means? And I think this simplification and this kind of boiling down, this very careful sort of world of symbols and ideas that Bowie spent his whole career kind of chewing over, and going over again and again and refining. I feel like some of that is being lost in the mix because of all of this,
Right.
we miss him, and because of all the emotion and because of all the emotional attachment people have, to the material, particularly the hits. And so that's
Yeah.
one thing that does give me a bit of pause, but you don't want to ruin anyone's fun. You don't want to go, oh, hang on, do you actually know what Black Star's singing about? You just, you call yourself a Black Star, but like, let's have a conversation. But then I don't want to be that music scholar that comes in and kills everyone's buzz.
Well, I wonder what you think of this. I think he did some of that himself in life, and I'll give you exhibit A and B is Heroes and Let's Dance. So Heroes, if you listen to it on the album, it's not a hopeful song at all. And I the word nothing appears in the song far more often than Heroes.
Yeah.
And Let's Dance has some very dark undercurrents, but when I was a teenager and it was a hit song, nobody picked up on that. Not nobody, but I didn't. And I think I think, I mean, I've never met him, but I think he was doing that on purpose. He was hiding the dark, almost like David Lynch, hiding the dark under the light.
Yeah, yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. Certainly, the these songs, they do take on additional meanings that like people project onto them, and it gets carried forward. I mean, he was the one who said, "Well, is uh, all art has multiple meanings." That
Hmm.
wonderful. Actually, I was in the V&A archive the other day, and I saw the actual bit of paper that was written on. It was really exciting to me because I quote that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like all art is unstable, right? Meaning is not that necessarily implied by the author. Um, it's true. It's true. But yeah, and I agree with you. It's like, you actually look at the lyrics, you take them on face value. Um, yeah, it's not,
Yeah.
this wonderful, let's be heroes. Everyone's a hero. It's not really that, is it?
No, and when I say he did it himself, it's like his
Yeah,
performance of the song at Live Aid sounded very
yeah.
different than his recording of the song on the album Heroes. You know, so we're talking about the cultural impact, but if I could sort of wind back the clock for a moment, before we started recording, we were talking about our own reaction both to the release of Black Star and then the news of his passing. And if it's not too personal, can I ask you what was your personal reaction to the album when it came out, and then the news that he passed away?
Mm. Well, I have to sort of go back to November
Yeah,
2015 when I heard Blackstar, the single, and saw the video. I found that personally so thrilling. I was so excited. In my world, Bowie's back. My favorite's back, and look, he's come back with a dark banger, and I was just really excited and elated. And that month, I came to New York to see Lazarus, and I remember being in a bar after seeing Lazarus. I mean, that's a whole thing, probably a different podcast entirely. But afterwards in the bar, having drinks, having a party with all my Bowie friends, putting Blackstar on a jukebox and singing it out loud, and just everyone going, Bowie's back, isn't this exciting? My favorite's back. And then I went to a party at someone's house, and Tony Visconti was there, and I couldn't help it. And I went up to Tony, I said, Tony, Bowie's back, blah. And by this point, I developed a thesis, which I thought was quite funny because Bowie was skinny again. And I was like, he's skinny again. This is the secret. And I started just jokingly, just having this little banter, thinking I was being cute. And I was like, I've got a thesis. You know, I think when Bowie's really skinny and when his cheekbones are out, that's when he's at his best. And I was talking about how when he was in Berlin, he would often eat eggs, like just to, he wouldn't eat much, or he'd just be on the eggs. So my thing was, oh, he's back on the eggs, you know, and Tony was appalled. And I remember he like got up and walked away. And of course, I didn't realize what I was saying, but obviously he was sick, and Tony knew. No one else knew. And I must have said something that just, you know, hit him the wrong way. And but thinking back on it, I just feel like such an idiot. Like what was I thinking? I was just so excited that experimental, dark, edgy Bowie, genre hopping Bowie was back, and gosh, I was thrilled. And the video was just exquisite. It is just exquisite. And yeah, so that was, yeah, brilliant. The Lazarus video came out in early January. That was, you know, the song amazing. Oh my gosh, that came out in December, I think, and I loved listening to that. I thought, oh gosh, this is going to be such a good album. The video, the weekend before the album release, that gave me a bit of pause. I was like, gosh, wow, you know, that's heavy, heavy stuff. Like I really didn't understand any of it, but I thought that's a lot to dig into. And then the album, of course, I loved. I rinsed it. I listened to it back to back all weekend, eagerly reading the reviews. Loved it. Everyone loved it. I said, yeah, I loved it. I was right. He's brilliant. He's back. Wow, this is so good. And not really sure what it all meant. Can't give everything away. It was a bit mystifying. I remember listening to it going, okay, like, it's a bit strange. Of all the songs while he was still alive, that was the one that didn't really hit me too strongly. I was like, okay, I like them all, but yeah, maybe I'll get into it. And then on the Monday morning, I woke up to a lot of messages, and my best friend Liz rang me, and she's like, he's dead, he's gone. And my immediate reaction was to like, I don't know, it was like the Enigma machine just clicked into place for me. It was like chuk, 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 and my brain, and I was like, oh wait, oh, and then like everything made sense.
yeah,
And in that moment, I was sad, I was shocked, but more than anything, I was excited. It was a strange feeling to have. Excited in the sense of like, that is amazing. Wow, he really did that. Oh my gosh, like, oh, the death was the piece. Oh, I get, you know, I get it. And I was in awe. I was in awe of it, the way it was executed and the way it all tied together, and all the themes all of a sudden, the whole thing that felt quite opaque and dense all of a sudden gained translucence. And I realized I realized what he'd done, and I was so proud of my favorite artist for doing that because it would
yeah,
never been done before. And then it wasn't until maybe halfway through the day that the sorrow hit me of the loss. You know, I lost my favorite. That's when that sort of realization came, and I realized that I felt sad for me and the world, but mostly for me, that he was gone, because he was my North Star in terms of uh, introducing me to ideas and music and books and concepts. And um, I just realized that, yeah, I was really sad to lose that.
yeah,
And so that was my whole experience with it. It is still my favorite Bowie album. I think nothing surpasses it in terms of songwriting quality, and the way that it's a tapestry of very carefully threaded ideas, but never tells you what to think, and is so artfully done, and just, yeah, in terms of dealing with the biggest ideas and being a culmination of the 50-year long thread of his artistry, the whole discography. I feel like it caps everything off, this hero journey from hopping off on a rocket to Blackstar, from be wanting to be a star to becoming a black star. This whole thing to me feels very complete. And I'm really thankful that it exists, in terms of
Yeah.
capping off the body of work.
I've heard you say that that type of interpretation might not have been entirely what he had intended because he wanted to make another album.
Yeah, yeah, which I think is the delicious thing, right?
Yeah,
It's like you can say, yes, he is terminally ill, and he probably thought this was his last project, and that's easier to make sense of in your brain, but you have to also keep in mind that he wanted to go on, and
yeah,
he was also thinking of ideas. He was in a purple patch. He had momentum. He was working a lot in 2015, and Black Star was finished before Lazarus was. And we're talking first couple months of 2015, and then he was working really quickly to get Lazarus done. But along the sides, he was also still thinking about music and still thinking about projects and emailing people and so on and so forth. And yeah, it wasn't, according to Tony and other insiders, it wasn't until later in the year that he was properly terminal, and he had like a kind of shorter time frame to work with. So you have to assume that in that period where perhaps he was working towards remission or he's feeling better, maybe he wasn't thinking, aha, when I die they're all going to he wasn't. I don't think it was that. But so I think holding both of those possibilities in your heart and mind at the same time is the thing to do,
yeah,
because I think you can't deny it, because it's just so immaculate and so exquisite the way that it works. And of course the themes are there and the timeline is perfectly there, but yeah, I agree with myself in that other thing that you read, that it, it is a mistake to project certainty on it, and to presume at the same time.
a lot of my thinking about this album over the last 10 years goes along the lines of, is this as good as I think it is? And it like 10 years later, it still seems that way. And if you think about all the albums that were his best since Scary Monsters, and that was the in joke, the Black Star seems to have transcended that, right? So it's your favorite. It has appeared on top or near the top of many lists of best Bowie albums. And when the year turned to 2025, it appeared near the top of the list of best albums, period, of the 21st century thus far. So, do you think we would think of it differently had he come out with a subsequent album?
Yeah, inevitably, I think, but not that it's not a good album,
Yeah,
but I think that whether by accident or design, his death plays a big role in its reception and its understanding,
yeah,
and how you consume the record, because it deals with themes of death in the songwriting and in its narrative arc, and so the fact of his death is unfortunately dictates how we engage with it. However, I
yeah,
think the way that we engage with it in light of his death allows us to access it in a way that makes it more powerful as a piece of art, and in terms of its sort of coherence, um, it makes more clarity. There's more clarity to the experience of the album in light of his death than there would be had he lived, because then it would be metaphorical what he's
right.
discussing. But
Yeah,
because he actually died, and because he was dealing with mortality in reality, it lends force to the work itself. It lends energy and power to the work, because it wasn't just a metaphorical engagement with death. And this is something that, I know it's very academic of me, forgive me, it's probably not that exciting either, but Heidegger's idea of being in time, this idea that you don't really understand mortality until you experience death or you're very close to it. Until you know that there's no more time, that's the only time you understand what it means to be alive. And I feel like there's a Heidegger energy force, there's this kind of clarity, this kind of scales falling from your eyes type thing about this project, that is, because he died so close to it coming out, the reception of it, I think it makes it more powerful, the themes that he's dealing with. I mean, I think I say in the book somewhere that, like, if had he died after almost any project, people would read it as a
Yes.
like, oh, like if he has somehow dropped dead after Heathen, people would
Yeah.
be like reading Heathen the Rays in the way that they do Can't Give Everything Away. Had he had dropped dead after Reality, people would be thinking about Bring Me the Disco King in a
Yeah.
similar way. And both of those songs are about death as well. But in a metaphorical sense, because he wasn't terminally ill. And so I think that fact, unfortunately, is one of the energizing forces in his
Unless
work.
I remember incorrectly, I think you made that point about Aladdin Sane.
Yeah, right.
People would interpret the song Time, right? And,
Yeah, yeah, they would. I
yeah,
mean, death is like one of his pet subjects. It comes up pretty much on every album. Um, and yeah,
yeah,
so I think this time around it was just a lot closer. And I think, yeah, I've said it a few times, but just one more time, that it's the energy that the fact gives it that animates the album in a way that makes it so compelling
yeah.
for better, for better, and worse. We've lost him, but it makes it such an energized piece of work.
Beyond Blackstar, but including Blackstar, he seemed to have a really acute sense of his own place in time. And Blackstar has these temporal references, like the line that I started with, something happened on the day he died. That's not a mistake. Or you say, I can't give everything away, right? You were confused about what that was about. But even his prior album, The Next Day, I always thought was, okay, we haven't heard from you for 10 years. And that's somehow a reference to, okay, now this is what happened. This is the next day.
Yeah,
He seemed like he was, we talked about his mythologization. He seemed like he was constructing it himself.
yeah. I feel like there was also some mystification going on.
Right,
You
right.
know, uh, Whatever persona Bowie was operating in, I felt like he was more personable before he went away in 2002, 2003, and came back a kind of more mystified. He wouldn't
Yeah,
really talk, spoken symbols or lists of words, and then the kind of self-references in The Next Day felt very mystifying. It felt like it was a game, like he's sort of throwing you a lot of ideas and symbols and imagery and kind of expecting you to figure it out. There's that white square that's that little when you open up the Next Day extra CD booklet, there's a white booklet that all white squares just called you, and it's an empty book for you to write. And it's really, I felt that to be very much an invitation from the artist to come play this game, like to like figure it out. You've got enough clues. I've dropped enough clues. Comb through it. This idea that the three words for every song title, we all had to be like Columbo and sleuth it out ourselves. But it kind of made us engage with the work in a different way. All of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, so we're getting fed breadcrumbs now, and oh, okay, so and I think that kind of starts from the artist is interesting, and like I think a way of the artist sort of teaching their audience to like, this is how I want you to engage with my work now. This is the register that I'm communicating in now. I'm not going to
yeah,
talk to you directly anymore. I'm not going to tell you what I'm thinking. I'm not even going to show you what I look like much, but I'm going to refer to things, and it's going to be a world of ideas. And so, as a music scholar, I thought that was number one, interesting. As a fan, I thought it was number two, quite generous, because you kind of opened up worlds of opened up spaces for you to create meanings in his music based on your factual and emotional and whatever connection you have to his back catalogue, but also what you're aware of his world, like what books he likes, like what ideas does he like, what things does he be engaging with his whole career. And it kind of opened up this space to really sit with his work and stare it in the eye and think about it and squint. And I just love that. Sometimes pop music is immediate and it's meant to be experienced and understood in the moment. The Next Day isn't that. Blackstar's not that. It's meant to be listened to and chewed over and thought about. And the more you listen and the deeper you engage, the more it gives you. And I like that
yeah.
from the late work. It gives it staying power. It means that the album doesn't get boring. You can come back to it and get more out of it in the future.
So, do you think that's part of the reason that there's the continued and maybe even intensified fascination with Bowie because he left us something to do?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
He left us homework, right?
Right.
Figure
Yeah.
it out.
Uh,
Maybe.
so, you mentioned The Next Day in Blackstar, which is the subject of your book. Do you find yourself listening to the later albums since his passing more than earlier albums?
Ah, yeah. I feel like I listened to them a lot while I was writing the book, so yeah,
Yeah.
for that reason. But even like after I had rinsed those albums while I was writing the book, I still listened to even like the No Plan EP, even the Lazarus soundtrack, the cast soundtrack. But Black Star certainly. The Next Day, more and more. It's such an unusual record. It's really like it's like an island, right, of its own. Huge amount of work, but a lot of uncertainty and a little bit of sort of one senses this tiny lack of confidence in it, and which I find really interesting. And then sort of all of the body of work, the castle of ideas that it is, and then you kind of have this very dense package that you are just given, and you're like, well, wow, I've got to do a lot of work to make this work. I've got to like do a lot of homework, a lot of reading, a lot of research to make this work. And I just think that's a really brave thing for an artist to do. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I still listen to the albums, but I tell you what, I listen to them from beginning to end now more than I used to. And that could be because I've given up on streaming. I don't subscribe to Spotify anymore. When I was on streaming, I would like choose songs that I liked and listen to them, or I'd go running with a playlist and I always go running to like Atomica and those next day extra tracks. But since I've gone off streaming, I'm listening to albums a lot more, and I think that that's probably a better way to experience the record. Because for a while there was a bit of discourse around the next day, like, would it be a perfect album if we just didn't have those songs that no one likes in the middle taken away, and if it was just this? And but forcing myself to listen to the whole thing, just again, to go back to what we were talking about before, puts the challenge on me for like, wow, okay, what's going on here? And maybe I have to do a bit more homework, or maybe I haven't cracked it yet, or and so it makes me go back to the album over and over again. And Black Star, from beginning to end, is such a lovely journey. And for me, I don't like listening to those songs in isolation. If I am going to pick a couple tracks, and if I'm feeling particularly emo, I might want to go for like Dollar Days and Can't Give Everything Away, just as like a quick one too. But yeah, it's usually a top to bottom record experience for me.
It seems like the order that he arranged the songs were purposeful, and not just on this album, but almost every one of his albums. Like
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
where you wouldn't put rock and roll suicide anywhere else on the album other than the end.
No, you wouldn't.
So yeah,
No, which I appreciate. I think, yeah, just as a personal thing, I think, the early noughties for me was where albums kind of disintegrated into tracks. And I think that was due to the consumption model. And in the last few years, I've gone back to albums and I've been collecting CDs again, and I've got a vinyl collection, and I reach for those and I don't reach for streaming anymore. And I think it's a more satisfying experience to engage with an artist's work, the way they intended it to be, rather than just songs sort of isolated and on their own.
yeah,
That said, some of my favorite Bowie records in the past have been like Changes One Bowie or I Select, and those CDs that came out in the late '90s, the best of, and it was like a little year to year, and it had like the glam period and the funk period. And I still listen to those, so maybe I'm just talking shit, but I do enjoy. I do enjoy the album
yeah,
experience, and yeah, I feel the artist curated it for you. Particularly Bowie would create kind of visual persona, and he'd do an artistic persona. Sometimes he'd give you a narrative if it was a concept album. And I'm just the kind of person that loves that stuff.
yeah.
Give me a world, give me a holiday from this horrible reality for 40 minutes. I'm all for it.
A couple minutes ago, you mentioned the video for Black Star, the
Yeah.
song, and in your book, and you have a video about the song, which really gets into an analysis of the images in the video itself, including the outfit that he's wearing with the white stripes. It's similar to what he was photographed on and the back of
Oh,
Station to Station.
you mean Lazarus, the Lazarus video?
Oh, did I say Black Star? I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
I meant
yeah.
Lazarus. Um, right. I apologize. I'm going to leave that in because I make mistakes, but
All right.
but no, yes, and you allude to the cabinet of Dr. Cagliari, um, and there's meaning that's conveyed through these images that is not evident from the song itself. And the other thing that you spend a lot of attention towards are the lyrics. When I've spoken to musicians who've played on some of these albums, they downplay the lyrics or the importance of the lyrics. But you put first of all, you explain the music part, and I'm not a musician, and I've actually learned a lot about music just from reading what you wrote. But
Oh,
you
that's
put
cool.
it really is. So thank you. But you also spend a lot of time with the lyrics, and one of my favorite things that you did was all the associations with the color blue and the word bluebird, and you have made the point elsewhere that he did know what he was doing because he's been doing by the time he got to Blackstar, he'd been doing this for more than 50 years. So my question is, how important is appreciating Bowie? How important are the videos, the lyrics, when you're talking about some of the clues in the album itself, whether it's The Next Day or
Mm,
Black Star, the little, you hold it up to a light and you see something different than what you just see. How important is
yeah.
that for really appreciating Bowie's art?
Well, I think it depends on what you want to get from it, but for me, it's important because there is depth there to be explored, should you want to. But the music's great if you just want to enjoy that.
Yeah,
Sounds good. He's in great voice. If you just want to enjoy his vocality, if you're just a fan of the sound of his voice, um, and if you enjoy, doing some sleuthing and putting together, conspiracy theories and whatnot, then there's stuff there to do that with too. I appreciate the depth, the ability to dig and find things. But you talk about analysis, and I mean, the Lazarus analysis was unusual for me because I'm generally not a person that I do consider lyrics, but usually I begin with the music, and that was my hook for the book was that I wanted to try and understand this music, but sort of cut through the noise of all of the it's about Satanism or it's about this or look at this thing in the video. That's what it's all about. I just wanted to go, well, what's going on in the music, and then build it out from there. So just to cut through all the bullshit and just to kind of say, well, I've got all my emotions. He's dead. I've got all my feelings, but actually, what is he doing? And then build it out. And so that's what I wanted to do. That's why it's called Black Star theory, like music theory and all of that.
yeah,
But with the Lazarus one, I approached the analysis from a new perspective, and that was because I was attempting to read the musical play with music as a dream, taking a hint from Jungian dream analysis. And for that, in a dream reading, they take symbols and they try and do this thing called active imagination. Like you take something, a symbol that's been thrown up by the subconscious, and then you start throwing around like all the things that it could be, just to try and find resonances of like, well, that could click with this or that could click with that. And so I was looking up how to do it. There's a fantastic scholar called John Izod who did sort of a Jungian reading of films, and he does Twin Peaks. It's really good. He does The Man Who Fell to Earth, which is where I found him. And that's a really great way to like look at images that come up as being like things that bubble up from the subconscious, and then if that's the case, then what could that mean in terms of meaning for the narrative or the story? And of course, in Lazarus, Newton is asleep, and it's a death dream, right? So he doesn't survive the night. But in this dream, all of these things happen, and if we read them as a dream in the context of what we know about that character and the fact that Bowie is like a parallel figure just standing behind this character, and it's all inferred that it's personally resonant because there's so many parallels, then what could it mean? And so that's where that came from. And it was like, well, he mentions the bluebird, and then of course you sort of throw up all these things that it could link to, and then you find all of these like very faint, but they're there. Like you sort of like think of a splatter and you think, well, that could be a constellation. You think Lazarus connects to this idea, connects to that idea, connects to this and that connects to somewhere of the rainbow. And then you go, oh, starman. But then you go, oh, Judy Garland. You think, oh, the Wizard of Oz. So you start sort of like, well, it's very
right.
faint, but like if you step back and you go, maybe there's something there. And I think that's what I was trying to do with that particular analysis. And I found it quite fruitful in the sense that it threw up a lot of things that I hadn't thought of in my own experience of the work, which is what you want an analysis to do, right? You want it to show you something new and some new insight. And so I found that to be a really useful exercise. And of course, the music video is also suggesting a dream, right? So that also brings in a lot of lovely things. But in my usual practice as a musicologist, I tend to go to the recording and the song, like the song, its performance and its production, as like the text to be read. Generally, outside of that, I start thinking of the video and extra readings. But in the case of Lazarus, it was such a strong construction. I thought that was the way to go about it.
Yeah, you're describing that, and I'm thinking of another song you did a similar type of analysis with from The Next Day. You're so lonely you could die, where your discussion
Yeah.
of it goes into Morrissey and rock and roll suicide, and I know it's going to happen someday, right? And you're drawing all of these connections that a casual listener I don't think would pick up on. And that's also, I mentioned that my appreciation for some of his songs changed after reading your analysis, and that's an example of it because after I think watching your video of that, you were talking about it. He gave us something to do, right? So I went back to that song and was listening to it over and over again, and then started listening to the Morrissey song, and you explain the music theory. I know nothing about music theory other than what I've read in your book, but that glam trope that appears, I wouldn't have picked up on that or understood what he was actually doing. And I think, why am I saying this? I'm not just saying this to praise your writing, but to bring up the deliberateness that Bowie was putting into all aspects of the product that he was coming out with.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when when you notice things like that, or they come up in the analysis, you just have to, I don't know, like if I had a hat, I'd sort of take it off. It's like, I'd take my hat off to that. That's an amazing little move. But yeah, this sort of stuff would come up in the analysis where I would say, right, cut the bullshit, right? What have we got? And I'd usually begin with like, what's the tempo? And what is the tonality? What's the key? And is it a bright or a dark key? And then what's the structure? How much of it repeats? And how much of it is new material? And what's the sequence? And okay, and is there anything interesting going on with time? Like, so how is the rhythm divided up? And is it syncopated, or is it anticipated, or is it evoking something? And then so you start with the bare bones of it, and then you think, okay, the lyrics, what are the lyrics saying? But then you think, well, how is he performing that lyric, and how does that change how the lyric is potentially read? And then how is that voice performance produced? So has it got effects? Has it got layers? Has it got auto tune? You never used auto tune. Has it got like stuff going on? And then you think about the arrangement, what is going on in the song with the sounds, and then from there things start getting really interesting, because first of all, you've got kind of like a blueprint, but all of the extra detail comes in, like, well, what's that guitar doing? That's familiar. That's actually something that appeared in a different song. Or he's done a
Yeah,
quote, he's done the drum beat for 5 years at the end. Why would you do that?
yeah,
But he's also evoked the guitar riff from Rock and Roll Suicide, which is the last song on Ziggy Stardust. And if you then repeat the album and go back to the beginning, you've got 5 years left. And so you think, oh, that's interesting. And then you think about that guitar line. I think there's actually a bit of beef that happened with that guitar line, i.e., Morrissey used it and he was upset about that. And that was the beginning of their beef. Not the beginning of, but it was one of the sore points in their relationship that they fought over. And so you go back to the Morrissey thing, and then you find that lovely video of him making a big point of that riff in the Black Tie White Noise EPK, where he's like shouting, yeah, 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 the suicide riff or whatever, and he's like trying to get someone to play it, and you think, gosh, and he put it in, and so then all of a sudden all of these details somehow recontextualize everything else, and so you start building in a picture. And I just loved it so much. I mean, talking about it now, I miss that, because like just engaging with these songs that I'd thought in passing, gosh, that's a bit depressing. Or I remember writing in a paper somewhere before, and I hadn't analyzed You Feel So Lonely You Could Die in depth. I just kind of considered it as an example of self-reference because of the drum beat. But I think I published in this paper called Bowie Musicology about, it's a mystery why it's such a dark lyric, but the way he delivers it is just so full of glee, and it's quite nasty, and I just sort of left it there because I hadn't really dug into it. But then you spend time, and what you just said, he gives you something to do. And I think
Yeah.
if you actually sit with this work and consider all the gestures that he's making, um, the rich rewards, you know what I mean? It's just that I love it so much. And to me, it feels really generous for an artist to do something like that, because he could have just knocked that song off. It's a cool song. His vocal performance is great. You could just go at the end like I did before, like, wow, that's a bit dark. Jeez. He's wishing that guy commits suicide, or, but in the context of rock and roll suicide, the idea of suicide, all of a sudden you go, yeah, of course, right. It's the opposite. It's the mirror image of rock and roll suicide. You're not alone. It's like, no, you're so alone that, you could die,
Right.
right? And it's like
Yeah.
you're not alone and you're going to die, or you're so alone you're going to die. And even that in its own is like, what a great portmanteau. And I like sit with that for a while and go, God, he was good, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So
And
I love that.
he's delivering the song in the second person. So,
Yeah.
the to continue the idea of it's the mirror image of rock and roll suicide, which is, I've used the lyrics of rock and roll suicide to buck up friends in tough situations, right? But
Yeah.
you feel so lonely you could die is like over the top insults.
Yeah. It's almost camp. I guess almost
Yeah.
camp the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I say, the fact that I lived with that song as a fan who's listened to it quite a lot, and the penny of that hadn't dropped until, I sat down to write my book, um, says a lot, that, there's just such rich rewards for re-engaging with this very dense work. And I love that. I love that
Yeah.
about the whole late period.
So we talked about how death has been a theme from even Bowie's very earliest songs. So has immortality. And what I wanted to ask was, do you think that he sought immortality or he was afraid of it? And just when I say afraid of it, is our endless tragic lives? The There are several movies he appears in where he is either immortal and that's not good, like The Hunger, or his characters live unnaturally long lives, like this obscure movie, Mr. Rice's Secret, where it seems like he's got this idea of immortality on his mind, but it's not clear to me if he's afraid of the idea or if that's what he was actually striving for, or did he see it as a double-bladed sword?
Mm. It's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, well, also, I mean, I sometimes have trouble with like braiding in the acting
Hmm.
into the narratives because it's a script that he said yes to do. But that said, he's this idea I think that I keep going back to is this one of um how do I put this in a nutshell without going off on a huge tangent? Like this the image of the ascended self, this the Ubermensch, right? This person who is like achieved gnosis and achieved this kind of, so whether it's a kind of Buddhist idea of like nirvana or like sort of self-awareness, or whether it's like a kind of uh, transcending something like space, or like a space 2001 space odyssey sort of thing. This idea, like it comes up in a couple of Tin Machine songs. I'm thinking about Baby Universal, this idea of like the ascended person or the powerful person or the godlike person is actually a baby, is actually really insecure, is actually problematic. This sort of thing throughout Bowie's mythology of hubris and of being godlike and that being a problem, the whole Ziggy thing, the false messiah, the problem of ego, uh the minotaur, all these sort of images of like corrupted, and even like in the late stuff, this idea of like um having sort of self-confidence, or Blackstar sort of shot through with this idea of this person is special, but the music is
Right.
suggesting that's a very dark idea indeed, and that sort of does appear quite a lot. The Next Day evokes lots of horrific imagery of tyrants and people who are really problematic, and the music suggests so as well, but he kind of lets you sit with it. It's like very much like a Black Mirror thing. And so your question about immortality, I feel like, um, for me, I read it slightly differently, and I sort of see it as somebody questioning the ethics of aspiring to godhood.
Mm,
I see somebody who's questioning how ethical or how desirable it is to be powerful. Um, and through his work, constantly kind of chewing over this idea of like the Superman and
right.
what that means, right? And evoking quite horrific imagery often when he does, about what the consequences of that are and how harmful it is. And parallel to that, I also see an artist constantly asking about meaning in life, and God, and you know, questioning whether God cares, if God's an uncaring God. And this idea that, you know, on this side you've got Bowie wondering aloud about, you know, if we ascend to godhood, then are we going to be evil? You know, is this going to be terrible? And on the other side, thinking, is God, does he care? You know, is he an uncaring God? And what does that mean for us? And particularly in the late period work, you have these kind of questions about, you know, uh, in Heathen particularly, sort of addressing God directly and kind of questioning God's motives and all sorts of things like that. And then on Blackstar and the Next Day, taking it up a notch. And so for me, that's how I kind of understand his sort of musings in terms of metaphysical questions and this idea of
Yeah.
self-evolution. And when I went back to Nietzsche texts and looked at the Jungian individuation stuff, to me, I think I make that connection in the book as like a way of kind of having to go through a process of individuation, of kind of connecting the shadow. And he sings about the shadow a lot. My God, you know, this like the shadow figure, this thing that we hide from the world that we don't want people to see, and integrating the shadow with the ego, and like sort of this integration allows you to be a whole person and to have individuation and to uh, achieve gnosis. And I think that's something that appears to be the work of some of this material. At least you could read it that way. And so that's what I kind of threw into the mix with that reading. So that's where I kind of got with it. But I think I'm still thinking about it quite a lot. You know, this sort of psychological work, if you want to even engage that idea, could it be useful, or is it instructive, or is it interesting to think about even at that level? And I think it is. I think if we think about Bowie's evocation of the shadow and think about some of his more troubling work as like a black mirror, like, you know, have a look at yourself, right? Can you recognize any of this? Because this is dangerous, or this is troubling, or whatever. I think Bowie does that quite a lot. You know, outside onwards, definitely, but throughout the whole catalogue. Sorry, I've gone off on a tangent. I said I wouldn't, and I did. I'm so sorry.
No, no, you're on the show because I want you to go off on tangents. They're the best. No, and I'll tell you, because what you were saying triggered all kinds of thoughts and images in my own head. And I'll mention two that are kind of random. But just why did I ask you about immortality? Because I think in a less direct way, Blackstar, the album itself, is addressing that. When I say in a less direct way, you know, on the next day, there's the song "The Stars Are Out Tonight," where I think, you know, it's the last example of contemplating the idea of living forever as a bad thing, right?
Yeah,
And you know, going back to the Superman, you know, we're talking about Nietzsche. You know, that's where the line the Superman led endless tragic lives, right?
yeah,
And you know, the hunger, and you know, like you said, somebody else wrote the script, but he chose that script, and that concept of living forever is you know, I can't think of a worse hell or a worse torture that he ever evoked than that idea
mm,
of being locked in a coffin, unable to
yeah,
move for eternity, right? So it's like you get what you ask for, but
yeah,
he's still like Blackstar itself there seems to be a deliberateness to the idea that he wants to be remembered for this work in a way that I don't think was on his mind when he did Reality, right? It
yeah,
might have worked for
yeah.
Heathen, but you know, there's so much that he did that I don't think had the intentionality of being a piece for the ages, like Blackstar seems to have been.
It seems to be, doesn't it? And yeah, you're right. And just going back to the immortality idea, I got from it this through the star, the poetic star imagery. I mean, the star means a lot, right? As a
Right.
symbol. And in the
One of his
artwork,
favorite words, right?
one of his favorite words, one that's associated with his brand,
Yeah.
but then used in such a way in the artwork, suggesting nuclear fusion
Hmm.
and black holes. And, if you start going in that direction, well, you start thinking about stars dying, but of course, stars don't really die, right? They transform. And so this idea of like death being a transformation, this idea of, your materials never go away, they just become something else. Um, is a it's cosmic and it's out there, but it's actually a really comforting idea if you sit with it for long enough. And you think that stellar objects, they don't disappear, they become forces, gravitational forces, they become traces, they become mysterious, uh, powerful. And if you're a big enough star, you become a black hole, which is like possibly interdimensional, no one really knows. And
Right.
so uh, linking all of that, you talk about that stuff and it feels very poetic and out there and symbolic, but what I appreciate about it is that it's actually real. Like, this is science. We understand this now, that we are made of photons and carbon, and like this stuff is actually eternal, right? It way outlasts our consciousness. And if
Yeah.
we do outlast our, yeah.
And where does that come from?
What do you mean?
The photons and the carbon. It's
Yeah,
stardust,
right, the
right?
Big
It's
Bang.
stardust.
And yeah,
Yeah.
stardust. And the Big Bang is the beginning, but it's also could be the black star or the death, right? The beginning and the end. And um if you sit there, like I remember for my book, I sort of talked to a few scientists and cosmologists about just some of these ideas. Like, does this hold water? Like, what, I'm not a scientist, but can you talk to me about? And consistently, it did hold water. Consistently there was something there that was rooted to the natural world, that was rooted to fact. It wasn't just a myth or a religion or some kind of tale or a fairy tale or, uh, transitioning to another realm. It was not that. It was actual our physical world. And then in that idea, you've got Bowie placing the image of the rock star, him being a star man.
Right.
The idea of the whole iconography of his career sitting in that, and then sort of placing a song where he calls himself a black star in it.
Yeah.
It just makes it really powerful. And I think if there's any really strong engagement with the notion of immortality, then it's got to be that
Yeah.
kind of construction at the very end of his life. Um, and who knows if it was a construction meant for him to try and make sense of his impending death, or who knows? And maybe it's just really clever and artful, and maybe he thought of it years ago and he's like, now's the time to deliver it. I don't know, but it
Yeah.
works really well. And I think it's comforting, actually, to think that. Yeah, our consciousness doesn't go on, but traces of us do. And
It's not for me to tell you that you're right, but I agree, and I want to point out two things that I've noticed that speaks to the intentionality of exactly what you just said. Um, so, um, so to say that, I'm going to say this. There's a line in the song "Boys Keep Swinging." They'll never clone you, and I've always wondered if in 1979 he knew that it's impossible to clone a male. And I don't know if that was known at that point. You can
is that
only,
true? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah, genetically it's impossible to clone a male. So did he know that or is it just
Oh my God.
coincidence?
This is like the
But
whole internet thing with Paxman again. How did he know that?
yeah, right. I mean, it could be random, right? He could not have known that, but maybe he
Yeah,
did. He did a lot of
maybe.
reading, right? But he did know, I mean, he absolutely had to know that not only are we Stardust, but that he's not the first artist to to evoke that. And I was thinking
No,
of, Crosby, Stills, and Nash's version of Joni
Woodstock's
Mitchell's
great.
Woodstock, right? They
Yeah,
add a line. It's we are Stardust, we are golden, we are billion-year-old carbon, right?
yeah,
And that, they did that, and Joni Mitchell's song came out even earlier, but they did that before Space Oddity, and certainly before Ziggy Stardust. And so
and before Carl Sagan's
right.
Cosmos book. Yeah,
So the idea of a black star being a black hole, which is like it could be like the singularity that existed before the Big Bang, like we retreat into that.
yeah.
He had to have been aware of that he's doing
He
that.
had he had to have done some reading on it. It's such a beautiful idea, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
It's so good. Yeah, I didn't know that that clonia thing. That's spookily good. Love that.
I mean, it's like to this day, I still discover things that he probably knew about when he wrote a lyric. And,
Right.
I'm not going to go off on my own tangent, but just, we're having this 2 days after I started researching um, Reet Petite, which is a line that's barely audible in Red Money, the song Red
Yeah.
Money. And
Yeah.
a song that I've been hearing, listening to for 40 years and didn't pick up on this particular line until last week. So I
What
started
did you find out about it? Yeah.
well, so it's the title of a song, a song from the '60s that borrowed the title from an earlier song from the '40s, which was called "Reet Petite and Gone." And "Reet" and "Gone," "Reet" meant sort of fantastic, and "Gone" meant sort of far out from '40s jazz slang.
Oh, so like Fantastic Voyage. Is that what he was saying?
He might have been. I also, so he just says, read petite and how do you do? And right, so I've always heard the how do you do, but I couldn't discern what he says before that. And so my crazy theory, so you're gonna like run screaming, why did I agree to do this? Is that he's actually referencing the earlier song, Read Petite and Gone, and he's playing with the meaning of words. So gone, for instance, I was thinking come in and gone. I was thinking about how Lodger has a lot of references to movement and travel. And I was also thinking about how he likes to, like earlier on the album, he drops in a reference to Dan Dare, which is another one of these lines that's hard to hear. And what is he talking about? What is Dan Dare? It's this obscure cultural reference. And he also likes the sound, right? Reet petite is sort of like Annie always eats her meat, right? It's like he
Yeah,
likes,
yeah.
yeah, and it's probably influenced by your writing. I'm thinking about all the associations, but is he trying to very subtly evoke the idea of multiple meanings, but also gone, right? He doesn't say the word gone, but that last song has project cancel, right? It's like it's
Yeah.
done, it's over, it's gone.
Goodbye. Yeah.
Yeah,
Album's done as well.
yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it past him to do something like that. It's fun to think of it being deliberate. Yeah. Love that
So,
stuff. That's cool. I don't think that's crazy at all.
ah, that's like a
No,
highest
I love it.
compliment.
No, I enjoy a good like Bowie lyrical conspiracy theory. I'm into it, particularly when it doesn't make much sense. You think, well, why then? And why would he do that? And then you think about it, could make all these connections. And
Yeah.
chances are, I mean, he's got form, particularly in his later period. So yeah.
So I'm just gonna ask you a couple more questions. Although, if you can't tell, I could talk to you for like days, but I wouldn't. I actually, before I do that, I have to apologize for something.
What?
When I started, so I've been doing the blog for many years, but when I started doing the interviews, I started doing them as written interviews, and I wrote to you, and you were kind enough to like basically give me an addendum to your book worth of answers. And you mentioned Heidegger. The first video interview I did was with Simon Critchley,
Oh
who,
wow.
right, who agreed to do an interview, but he said, I'm not going to do a written interview. I'll do a video interview. So I had to learn how to do this, and that spawned this show. But it only then did it occur to me what I was asking you to do in a written interview. It's such a bigger commitment, and so I apologize. But I have this chapter. It's like an extra chapter of the book. If anybody wants to read it, it's still online. So,
Oh,
but I'm saying that because to sort of close this out, he uh, he was definitely conscious of what he was doing with I Can't Give Everything Away, even if he might have intended to make another album. So I'll two closing substantive questions, and then I'm gonna wrap it up with a silly question. So that song seems to be far more overt than anything else on the album. And why do you think he was doing that? But in my mind, related question is by this point, you use the word remystification. Um, it seemed like the character that everybody thought was the real Bowie of 10 years earlier, the sort of avuncular, I think you called him Jonesy, right? That everybody was like, well, this is finally the real guy. He's finally showing his hand. But
Yeah.
that wasn't true, right? And so it's now at the end with the next day and with Blackstar, he becomes a sphinx. He becomes inscrutable. But yet the final song on the album couldn't be more explicit. What's going on?
Well, I like to see it as a kind of a moment where the mask sort of slips and he looks you in the eye and you kind of understand something. That's how it feels to experience the song for me. It's kind of like an acknowledgement of like we've been, engaged in this game. I've been throwing you lots of art and dense ideas and big projects, and particularly the late work. It's quite tough to engage with. Tis a pity she's a whore. It's like, well, what do you do with that? You got to sit with that and make it work. You got to do some homework, right?
Yeah,
Blackstar is a 10-minute thing that's full of contradictory ideas, and you can't just read that song off the cuff. You have to dig in to make sense of it. And so there's a lot of that kind of energy. There's a lot. It can be exhausting. At that last song, it's not exhausting, is it? It's like you're just lingering in this kind of safe space where the artist is like sort of you know uh, just shoots a look at you and says, it's what you want, and this is what you want from me. I can't tell you what's going on. And if I
yeah,
did tell you explicitly what's going on, you wish you wouldn't know, and actually it's better this way. And
yeah,
we both know that, and it's like this moment of shared understanding, I feel, or him seeing us as his audience. That's how I feel, and that's just me projecting entirely my experience onto it. I'm not saying that that's what the song means at all, but that's how I feel when I listen to it. I feel the artist sees me, is recognizing his audience, and is saying, I'm like this because this is why you love me, and I'm
yeah,
giving you what you want now, and I can't give you everything, but it's okay. You don't want me to, sort of thing.
yeah, yeah,
And could that be because he knew he was terminally ill? He didn't know he was terminally ill when he wrote it, but maybe he had a sense that he wasn't going to be around for much longer. Maybe he thought, actually, for the last 3 or 4 albums, every one of my last songs has been like a I'm going to die soon song, and this is going to be my I'm going to die soon song, and he just died sooner than he thought. Either of those things could be true.
yeah,
Um, and it doesn't change how powerful the song is at all if you hold either of those meanings in your hand. And that's great, isn't it? What a
yeah,
beautiful song. It's one of my favorites now. And as I said before, it really didn't hit me when he was alive. Didn't really make much sense at all. And of course, it makes perfect sense now that he's gone.
I hear it also as the end of a journey that starts with Space Oddity, putting aside the first album that he sort of put aside. But if you think about this, the slow fade in to Space Oddity, and then the
Yeah,
way I Can't Give Everything Away ends, it
yeah,
it's like you could listen to everything in order, and it tells a story.
yeah. I love that. I
Yeah,
love the way that the song lingers because it just goes around and around again. The song is really simple. There's not much to it. Um, but it's quite a long song in the end.
yeah,
And it just feels a bit like you don't want to leave yet. So you just stay and go around again and let's get another solo from Donny. Now let's get Ben
yeah,
Monders to do a
yeah,
guitar solo. And
yeah,
now let's add some organ and and then it just sort of fades away and collapses into this really soft chord and it's quite mysterious. And I love that. That's so generous. I think that's really generous. It could have
yeah,
just been a song that he tossed off. There's just not much to it. He repeats the verses twice, and it's like, but what a thing, you know. I feel embraced by that song, and it's and what I know the EP came out after, but to me that's like the end of the catalog. It's so
yeah.
perfect.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I feel the same way. So I'll tell you a question I was going to ask, but you like the last 40 minutes, you answered it without me asking, which was,
Oh,
I'm presuming you didn't actually personally know David Bowie. I never met him,
yeah,
yet he has this emotional connection to our lives, and not just you and me, but thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of fans. And I was going to ask why, but I think you've explained that. So,
a hard one to answer though, if you put it like that. But yeah, I think we've been talking about that all along, haven't we?
Yeah,
About sort of, yeah, I think
I mean
certainly,
he's not just giving us something. He's giving us, again, it's almost like the theme of the interview. It's like he's giving us something to do, right? He
yeah,
doesn't tell us what to think about his own music, but he drops these clues, and there's an intentionality. But he's the only thing he's telling us is bring our own meaning to it, and it affects us. You know, we were both talking about how something that he wrote without knowing us made sense to us in our own context in a very emotional way.
yeah. I think it's some of it is down to him being really good at what he did. He's such a good songwriter. Um, so it's one of the things that I go on about all the time. But I get annoyed when people like summarize Bowie as an image. They say, "Oh, he was a haircut, and he was fashion, and he was gender, and he was that."
Yeah,
And I'm like, "No, he wrote songs. That was his career. He was writing
right,
songs, and he was really bloody good at it." And to the point that his songwriting practice kind of evolved into something bigger than songwriting. It was like world building. It was like self-referential. It was like index cards. It was, it had this sort of like a library sort of idea to it, where you can understand the song on a level because it's a good song, because he's a good songwriter, and he's a really magnetic performer. So you could just enjoy him performing a good song. And then you have these this deeper levels that you can engage with the work should you want to, multiple levels of access. And I appreciate that. And that is artistry. That is somebody who says, yeah, this is a single, but also it exists in the world of this, but also in the context of this persona that I'm performing. So think about that, but also all the references that I'm making to obscure songs, to, I don't know, like the Gousters, like Chicago gangsters that wore really great outfits. And like, okay, that changes everything. Just brilliant, and through that process, you become more literate, you become more aware of the world. He introduces you to ideas, some of them below the radar, some of them subversive: literature, art. Outside taught me a lot about art, that I didn't know about. And that goes back to what I was saying before about how I felt when he died. I felt like I'd lost somebody who really introduced me to cool stuff. So I
right,
learned so
yeah,
much from engaging with his work. And I felt like, well, how am I going to learn now? Who's going to keep me abreast of the cool things? That was one of the first thoughts I had when he died. And of course, gosh, if he was still alive, he'd be coming up to 79, wouldn't he?
he would.
The elderly.
I just saw Paul McCartney, and he put on a great show at the age of 83. So I think we would
I
still be
saw that
getting
gig. I
stuff.
saw that tour as well. Gosh, that was good, wasn't it?
Yeah. I not
Yeah.
not to talk about that, but I brought my parents, who are his contemporaries. They had never seen him. They could have seen him 60 years ago.
Oh,
And
wow.
so he still gave them a major life moment, this
Yeah.
in 2025. Isn't that crazy? But if Bowie
So
was still
mad.
around, that's what he would be doing with us, with us. I,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of, it might be apocryphal, but there's a story about when Franklin Roosevelt died. There's a reporter covering his death, and there was a man on the street crying. The reporter comes up to him and says, "Did you know President Roosevelt?" And the man said, "No, but he knew me."
Oh, ooh, I love that. Oh, that's really good. Get a little bit of goosebump there. That's really
Yeah.
good.
So
Yeah.
let me close with a silly question, but
Okay.
I ask everybody the same closing question.
Okay.
So and you could say it will be different tomorrow, but what's your favorite? You said Blackstar is your favorite Bowie album. What's your favorite Bowie song?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So yeah, Dollar Days is my favorite song from the album. But I have a huge soft spot for Teenage Wildlife.
Yeah.
The song has been a favorite for a really long time. So if there was a favorite song that's not on Blackstar, it'd be that because just to me, it's such uh, camp, catty, dramatic, vainglorious, honest, vulnerable song about fame and about getting older and about not knowing what's going on in the future, feeling out of touch, feeling like you're losing your edge, but also being really camp and self-important with it. And to me, that's just wonderful. But then the performance, the scope of the song, it sort of feels very epic. It feels like it's evoking girl groups and a bit of Ronettes. It's like so much going on in that song, and it's so beautifully produced, and it feels like a bit of a I don't know. To me, it feels like a tiny little insight into the psychology of the artist at the end of a decade, of a confusing time, very productive decade, you know, so marking the end of the 70s. Wow, what a decade for Bowie. And then for him to be sort of, you know, feeling like that is, to
Right.
me, that's a really interesting thing, and makes that song really compelling for me. Uh,
Yeah.
and on top of it just being killer song as well, like just really well written. So yeah, that's my answer. It's not a
With
silly
obscure
question.
references too.
Yes, very obscure
Yes.
references and amazing lyrics. Oh my gosh, like midwives to history put on their bloody robes. What a line. And the song is full of them. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, David, what shall I do? They wait for me in the hallway. I mean, just amazing moments. And the use of the voice too, like all sorts of Bowieism coming out, you know, more so than Heroes. So really kind of upping the kind of weirdness of the vocals, which I love as well.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. I feel like I want to comment on that song, but I won't because I want to leave it with your commentary.
Oh,
So
okay. All right.
Dr. Leah Kardos, this has been wonderful. This is really this is the discussion I wanted to have as we approach the 10th anniversary of David Bowie's passing and the 10th
It's been
anniversary of
fun.
Blackstar. So thank you so
Yeah.
much. I hope you come back. I hope you come back 10 years from now, but before then too. So
Yeah, Blackstar at 20. Gosh.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, it's been
Well,
fun. Thank you so much.
thank you. Well, we'll stay in touch.